It was the same story for last year's winner, Aitor Gonzalez. For the moment, the new leader is Joaquin Rodriguez, best of the Spanish Once squad, as they hold the top 4 places. The Vuelta Espana rolls on to Santander next on OLN. And as we look out across the northern coastline here of Spain, the rain has found the race again today, raining since the off this morning, but hopefully it'll be a little bit drier by the time the riders get to Santander. Hello everybody, welcome back. Our live coverage today of the Vuelta Espana. I'm Phil Liggett, joined of course by Paul Sherwen and by Bob Roll. We'll keep you well in touch with the race as it now goes along the northern coastline of Spain. Bit of a flat route today. It should be a day for the sprinters, but you can never tell. Let's have a look very briefly where we go. It's a 96-mile stage today, 154 kilometres, coming away from the hills of the Asturias as we now head in towards Santander. 35th time we have finished at this port on the northern coast of Spain. Just to remind ourselves, there are in fact 2 third category climbs. They're not very hard, the Rebolada and the Montana. Montana coming much nearer the end, but I don't think it'll be tough enough to spoil the day out for the sprinters, although there is indeed a breakaway at the moment with a gap of something like 3 minutes over the field. So let's catch up then with our first live pictures. These are the riders now in the breakaway. Last time check was just 3 minutes for Constantino Zabaye. Yes, that man from Kelme in the breakaway again. Biertzeberg, Unai Echeverria and Vicioso. Those are the 4 riders out in front. There have been 1 or 2 surprises on the road already. You can see here the rain still coming down here. We thought it was going to go away, but it hasn't been the case. After the 17th kilometre today, we lost 1 rider from the Seiko team. There's the situation. We've got 194 left of the 198 who started out on Saturday. Gavazzi is the last rider to abandon, or the first rider of the day for Seiko. And moments ago, we also lost David Plaza from Team Bianchi. We've had pictures of him, in fact, sitting in the team car holding his face. He has a very, very severe toothache, and although he struggled in to finish yesterday and was in last position, he's gone today as the pain has continued. Well, there's the peloton, and it's moving very smoothly. They did 46.5 kilometres in the first hour, which is very, very good indeed, and I suspect it's because of the rain. Well, let's remind ourselves of the general classification. Still equal time amongst the Once boys at the top, but only 4 of them left up there now after that team time trial. A little switch amongst the leaderboard, though. Rodriguez getting the better place finish yesterday in 5th, so he's taken the golden jersey of his teammate Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano. Nozal is the local boy, by the way, today. He might be the next man in gold, who knows. Roberto Heras of the favourites seems to be doing the best, with the US Postal team looking to have been well in that team time trial. Juan Mercado completing the top 10. Some names for you to conjure over here, though. Oscar Sevilla had a good day at 45 seconds. Aitor Gonzalez, defending champion, already 2 3/4 minutes back. Levi Leipheimer still looking for form after his crash in the Tour de France, 14 minutes behind. And David Miller in disastrous straits there, losing more than 17 minutes yesterday. We've only done 176 kilometres plus what they've covered so far today in this race, and already there are huge time gaps.
There certainly are, and it's actually a very good tactical position for Team Once to be in at the moment, Phil, because in fact they've got a man in the leading breakaway, Angel Vicioso. He started the day in 24th place, and he's virtually the leader on the road right now. But what we're seeing in the main field, although they're going through the feeding station for the moment, what we are seeing is the teams of the sprinters coming forward. We've seen a lot of work being done by Alessandro Pataki's riders on the front end of the main field, and also occasionally we've seen Team Telecom, because they're thinking about a victory today for Eric Zabel. This is an ideal stage for the sprinters, but what they do have to do first, though, is pull back this 4-man breakaway.
Well, Bob, they're coming through the feed zone. Not a bad day for racing, though. It's in the low 60s.
It's a little bit cool, and it's rainy. The riders usually pedal a little bit faster when the temperatures cool down, just to stay warm. You can see them now starting to take down the arm warmers and take off the rain jackets. A little bit of sun coming out. Not ideal conditions, but not too bad. It's not too hot and it's not too cold, but the rain does make the riders speed up a bit, and we have a very high average speed and about a 10-mile-per-hour southwesterly wind.
Which won't really affect the race too badly today. But in that feeding zone there, Bob, any warm drinks you think being passed up?
Probably not warm drinks today. It's not that cold enough for that, but there was a little bit of chaos there as riders started to split around the feeders. And whenever you have a situation when riders are on the wrong side of the feeders, it's pretty dangerous. You want the feeders to be on the very far right-hand edge of the road. In Spain, they tend to creep out a little bit, and I always found the feeding zones in this Tour of Spain and in the Spanish races to be a little bit more dangerous than the rest of the feed zones in Italy, for example, or in the Tour de France, where they're very well organized, very well controlled. In the Vuelta a Espana, you have feeders all over the road. Guys start to go on the right-hand side of there, and anything can happen when they try to come back into the field. Riders are trying to get their feedback. So didn't look like we had any incidents today, though.
Well, this looks like Juan de Los Angeles doing all of the work on the front at the moment. Fasaborto, the workhorse on the team, trying to set it up perhaps at the finish for Pataki, but they've still got to work out how they're going to pull back the four men out front. They broke away at the 19th kilometre and they're still holding on to a 3-minute lead. We'll take our first break. See you in a moment. And welcome back. We're looking at the 64.8 kilometre point now to the finishing line here on stage 3 to Santander. The breakaway of 4 riders: Angel Vicioso from Once, Unai Echeverria, the Venezuelan, for Euskaltel. Here are the names for you. Constantino Zabaya of Kelme always seems to lack respect to the peloton in the Tour of Spain. He's always on the attack. And Beat Zeberg of Rabobank. They got away at around 19 kilometres. Maximum lead just over 3.25 minutes, and Zabaya has been picking up the sprints along the way, so he's building a lead in that particular competition. Significant, though, there are no time bonuses, Paul, in the Tour of Spain.
It's strange they don't follow the recipe that the other races have throughout the calendar. They don't have any time bonuses at all, and maybe because they want the race to be won by a climber, and which is usually the case here at the Vuelta a España. You can see the time difference there between the escapados, the breakaway, and the peloton. It's hanging around about the 3-minute mark for the moment, but when you look at the anger and the speed in the main field, I really have a hard time believing that those 4 men at the front are going to survive. I do think we'll come down to a bunch sprint towards the end.
Good call by Once, Bob, because this man's really considered to be their sprinter, Vicioso, but right now he's the leader of the race on the road.
That's a fantastic place to be. You don't have to work. These are very strong riders in the breakaway. Zavala, most especially. Beat Zeberg has won a lot of races in Spain. He won a stage of Pays Basque last year, and the year before that a stage in the Tour of Spain. And the Euskaltel riders are always aggressive, so Once is looking good right near. They have their rider, the fastest man on their team, one of the fastest guys in the race, Angel Vicioso. And here's a shot of Roberto Heras.
Well, there he is, Roberto Heras, the one man who's made no mistakes so far, because he's only just 45 seconds, so a few seconds off the race lead. He finished well yesterday. And Roberto Heras, I must say, of all of the riders now, has established himself, I think, as the favourite for this year's Vuelta. So we've asked Bob Roll to just tell us a little bit more about him and how his season has evolved.
In July, Roberto Heras played the role of Lance Armstrong's right-hand man. But in September, the U.S. Postal Team rides in support of the climbing Spaniard. Heras made a name for himself after winning the 2000 Vuelta, resulting in the Postal Service signing the then Kelme rider. Still, the 2002 Vuelta is sure to be on the mind of the talented 29-year-old who lost last year's race in the final time trial. This past July at the Tour de France, his performance wasn't as strong as in previous years, succumbing to illness in the early mountain stages. But his superiority as a climber remains unquestionable. With a motivated, strong U.S. Postal Team behind him, Roberto Heras is certain to be a contender for the final podium in Madrid.
Well, a marvellous record he has too in the Vuelta, with a win, a second. He's finished twice fifth, he's finished third, he's finished sixth, so he knows exactly how this race is needed to be ridden, and he'll look forward to the hills which are coming not very long down the road now, of course, Paul, because we're heading into France this year and the Pyrenees.
It's going to be very difficult, those two Pyrenean stages, and then they pop back over the Pyrenees to another mountain top finish in the outskirts of Andorra. Very difficult in the first 10 days of racing the Vuelta a España. If Roberto Heras wants to win this bike race again, he's also going to have to ride well in the individual time trials, because there's around about 75 kilometres of flat individual time trialling in this year's event. There are 2 individual time trials still to come, and that's where Roberto Heras has really tried to improve himself over the last couple of years, but Bobby doesn't really seem to have found the power necessary to ride a good time trial.
He did seem to work on it a little bit before last year's Vuelta and in the off-season last year, because he knew he had a very solid chance to win. He was scintillating on the climbs last year, most especially the Angliru, when he took all kinds of time out of the whole peloton. It was one of the most awesome displays of climbing power that I have ever seen in a bike race on the slopes of the Angliru last year. If he can do similar rides this year, we have so many mountaintop finishes. I think that it'll have a solid lead going into the flat time trials, but there is one 53-kilometer time trial, and in the past he's proved to lose a lot of time in those. Very diminutive of stature, not of character, of course, but he does have a hard time on the flat time trials where the power riders take so much time out of the climbers.
But he does have the advantage in the final time trial of the Vuelta a España this year is actually an uphill time trial. It's 11 kilometres with an average gradient of around about 9%, so I don't think if he's in the lead by that stage he has to worry too much about losing the lead to a man like Aitor Gonzalez, who in theory is one of the best individual time trialists in this race, but he certainly this year has not shown the form that gave him victory last year, Phil.
Yeah, I'm not so sure Aitor's going to see Madrid, but if he does, it's interesting to remember that Gonzalez beat Heras last year in this race by 2 minutes and 14 seconds. At the moment, Heras is ahead of Gonzalez by 2 minutes and 34 seconds, so who knows?
Just after 2 weeks of race, 2 days of racing, and we're looking here at around about 60 kilometres to go to the finish. Cabeza de Carrera means the front end of the bike race, and the front end is very much as it has been since the 19th kilometre. These are the 4 leaders right now. Beitzeberg, no stranger at all, as Bob says, to racing in Spain. In fact, he won himself a stage of the Semana Catalana earlier this year. In second position there, you can see the Spanish rider from Kelme. He's always on the attack. That's Zabaya, followed up there by Unai Echevarria. And having an armchair ride in the yellow jersey there of Team Once, well, that's Vicioso, the sprinter on the squad. He doesn't have to do any work at all because he's actually defending the lead of his own teammate Rodriguez.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're on stage 3 of the Tour of Spain. A breakaway of 4. Have been away since 19 kilometres, a lead of just 3 minutes. And don't forget, we're into the week of live coverage of the Vuelta a España, and tomorrow we're back with you again at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 on the Western Coast, and we'll be on stage number 4. So stay with us here on OLN. Well, the peloton, occasionally we've seen coming to the front the Fassa Bortolo ride. There's Aitor Gonzalez passing through. He wears number 1 as last year's winner, but he has been doing quite a bit of work today at the front of the race to keep this breakaway limited, obviously to hope that Pataki, the team sprinter, will add to his stage wins this year. With the culmination of the Tour of Spain, Tour of France rather, and the Tour of Italy, Pataki has won a total of 10 stages, and he certainly wants to join a little bit of the history books by winning at least one in this year's Tour of Spain. Still plenty of time, 58 kilometres to go, about an hour and a half to race. We'll take another break. Welcome back to the Tour of Spain. A little bit of blue appearing in the clouds now. The heavy rain which waved the riders away from Cangas de Onís a couple of hours ago seems to be drifting slowly but surely away. This is US Postal. Had a wonderful team time trial, failed by just 15 seconds to win it, but they have put Roberto Heras up there. And I think this man, Bob, had a great ride yesterday, Oscar Sevilla. He's only got about 4,000 kilometres training in his legs.
He looked fantastically strong on the Category 1 climb just before the finish, leading the peloton across the top. Roberto Heras and Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano tucked in on his wheel. De Galdeano looked to be in a lot of trouble. Roberto Heras, no problem at all. But Oscar Sevilla was very impressive yesterday, and I think he's in good form. We might see him continuing that in the mountains to come when we get into the Pyrenees. He is a fantastic climber, when he's on form. He's been dogged by some injuries throughout this season. He's one of the big stars of Spanish cycling, and he's very desperate to do a good Vuelta a España.
Well, looking here, Phil, at the 4 leaders, they're still working very well together, and you can see from the GPS that the time gap is starting to come down somewhat. But these 4 guys, 3 of them are working exceptionally well together. but they will have a hard time. And it's good to see that the weather has changed somewhat, although they don't have to worry too much about the weather conditions for the finish. It's a fairly safe finish this afternoon, and in fact there's only one small bend with around about 250 meters to go. In the main field, though, it's the teams of the sprinters will be looking to try and get some glory over the next couple of days before we pop across the border into France and those very difficult mountain stages in the Pyrenees. You can see the pink and blue jerseys of Team Lamprey. They're taking a serious effort on the front end of the main field. They're thinking about the possibility of a victory for their sprinter Jan Svorada.
Already a winner in Santander back in 1997, so I'm not sure it's actually the same running, but it certainly is very close to the seaside when we get down to the line. A few ducks there, and coming to an end of the year, be on migration soon, I would think. Those little ducks down there, Bob.
Maybe they know something that we don't know about the weather in Spain for the rest of the year. They seem to be quite a ways north so far, but they probably are enjoying this weather.
Well, I think it's the white-faced duck and the ruddy duck which are causing quite a problem in Spain because they're mixing the genes, Bob. Anyway, Alessandro Patacchi is the man looking for the sprint win today, and if he gets it, he's going to join the history books because he would be one of only 3 riders to win 3 different stages in the 3 big races. And while we're looking at Alessandro Patacchi, let's ask Paul Sherwen now to tell us a little bit more about him.
2003 has been a breakout year for Italian speedster Alessandro Patacchi. So good, in fact, that he's now trying to become only the 3rd rider in history to win a stage at each of the Grand Tours in the same season. He's also on the verge of breaking the record for the number of stage wins in the Grand Tours in a single year. Mind you, standing in his way is the great German Eric Zabel, who at 33 years of age is still one of the fastest men in the peloton. Patacchi's had 6 victories at the Giro this year, 4 at the Tour de France. Add to that the 11 wins in other races, and there's no doubt about it. Alessandro Patacchi is the new man to beat when it comes down to the sprint.
Well, there's a nice picture, isn't it, with the Spanish riders now trying to chase down those breakaways and maybe present Alessandro Patacchi with the chance to win. 1958 was the last time that record was done, and that was by Adriano Baffi's father, Pierino. And there's the information for you. I think the question mark, we'll probably be able to take that off in the next few days and confirm Patacchi as the next man to have joined what we're calling the Grand Tour Triple Club. Well, it's always green in this part of Spain, Paul, because it seems to rain a lot more up here than any other part of Spain. Yet once we go south, we're guaranteed the sun.
Well, Asturias is reputedly the wettest part of Spain, but these riders will be looking forward to moving across towards the Mediterranean in a few days' time. But to get there, it's a very difficult ride. And with the weather conditions like this at this time of the year, it could be very difficult going through the Pyrenees. And it's no stranger to the Tour of Spain sometimes to have snow on the top of some of the mountain peaks as they go through the Pyrenean stages. So that's something that many of these riders will be thinking about over the next couple of days. But when we do get down to the south and the climbs like the Sierra Nevada, these riders will expect the weather to completely change from the round about 60 degrees Fahrenheit they're experiencing today to somewhere around 80 degrees Fahrenheit when we get to the southern part of the peninsula.
That's right. Certainly the weather of the Tour de France will not be greeting us at Cotteret, where we've had glorious summer days up there in the Pyrenees. I think it'll be a little bit more violent, but let's hope not too violent. Bob, there is a problem, of course, with Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano, isn't there? Because he's actually banned from racing on French soil, and there might be a move to stop him entering France.
The French have said that he's not allowed to race on their soil because of an irregular reading for an asthma medication that he is allowed to take by the UCI rules. It's established. It's on his medical record. Sonambutol, I think it's called.
Salbutamol, yes.
And the French, because he had more than the allowed amount in his urine, they will not allow him to race in France. So it'll be an interesting situation. It's a Spanish race coming into France for just a day for a stage finish in Cotteret, but time will tell whether or not they've been able to resolve that situation in the meantime. That'll be very interesting.
Well, in fact, actually, the race organisers have said that if there does appear that there's going to be a problem with taking the Tour of Spain across onto French soil and Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano, they may well even change the race route at the last moment. But, Phil, as a race organiser yourself in the past, that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it isn't. And knowing how the French react, they won't tell you until you're on the soil anyway, so I don't know how they'll know how to change the route. But I do feel that they'll allow this race to pass without hindrance. It wouldn't be good publicity for either country. Salbutamol is the product which he was found having too much of in his system, and it is a product used for asthma, and we do know that Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano suffers from asthma. It would have been a problem, you know, in the Tour de France, because if he hadn't have fallen off and broken his collarbone, I'm almost certain the ONCE team would have named him in the squad for the Tour de France, and then we really would have seen some fireworks. Anyway, the Tour of Spain is what we're watching, and we are going forward towards the finish. Now, if you've missed any of the action from this weekend's PBR from Reno, Nevada, then OLM will give you another chance to check it out. The best rides, the worst falls, and all of the highlights will come to you tonight at 8 p.m, of course, only on OLM. What a lovely picture that is. We charge Sub alongside the river here, heading towards Santander. Still 3 riders in the lead. The gap at the last check, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. There's still a little bit of work to be done. We'll take a break. And welcome back. Another nice picture for you as the roundabout there splits up the peloton as they continue now through the province of Cantabria, as we head towards the capital of the state, Santander today. 154 kilometres, 96 miles that is, and it'll be the 35th time the riders will have arrived in Santander. There's the latest time check we have, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. A number of teams showing good interest, but not, of course, the team of the golden jersey, because they have a man in the breakaway, Angel Vicioso. If this breakaway succeeds by more than 1 minute and 19 seconds, he will be the next wearer of the golden jersey.
Well, it's an ideal tactical situation to be in, and they know, the team of ONCE, that the sprinters teams will try and whip up the pacemaking, as we've seen on a number of occasions. And the team, I think, who will be relied on to do the majority of the pacemaking will be the team of Alessandro Patacchi. He's the most successful professional on the circuit this year, with 21 victories to his credit. And I think we can see now the effect that the pacemaking on the front end of the peloton is actually having. It seems, if we look at the main field here, as if the peloton really are charging along. The gap has come down to 2 minutes and 6 seconds, and in fact it's also the team of Alessio and Angelo Furlan trying to whip up the pacemaking as well. He's always been very good at the sprints at the Tour of Spain, although he hasn't had a great season so far this year.
3 riders have won at Santander who are currently riding the race. Serrada in 97 for Lampre, Lombardi of Domina Vicanzi in last year, and Leonardo Piccoli also getting a victory here back in the year 2000. That was when Heras won the race, wasn't it, Bob?
Roberto Heras did win the race in the year 2000 because he was climbing so well. He had enough time in the time trials that he wouldn't lose the overall by the end. Santander finished here last year, and as you recall, Giovanni Lombardi, who is Mario Cipollini's main lead-out man, got a great stage win for himself. He also did a similar situation in the Giro this year. He is a wonderful bike racer. That was from a breakaway situation, both of those wins. He's very fast, leading out Cipollini. He can take his own chance, too. And now that Cipollini's gone home so early in the bike race, it wouldn't surprise me to see if Giovanni Lombardi came up and tried to win the stage today for the Domina Vacanze team. They are the best drilled lead-out team in the business. So if they can get it together and lead out Lombardi, he will have a very good chance at doing the stage win. But Patacchi is so very fast this year. Not even Cipollini himself has been able to get the better of him.
Lombardi also wants to win here because he actually lives in Spain. He lives in Madrid, and he's just opened up a shop in the outskirts of Madrid and has a Spanish wife. And I think he was very upset by the approach to the Tour of Spain by the team, and the fact that they were in and they were out depending on the participation of Mario Cipollini. And I think right now he'll be looking for some kind of revenge, and maybe the possibility of showing that Domina Vacanze is a very good team even without Mario Cipollini being there. Just looking here at Gonzalez, certainly not having a great start so far. On the far side is Dario Frigo. He's 25th in the overall classification, a minute 25 down. But that was time lost in the first day's team time trial. He was actually in the leading group with all the other leading contenders yesterday. So I think Frigo in much better form here than he was earlier in the season.
Yes, it's not the best place to be, sitting around the back. We've heard, by the way, that Eric Zabel's had a flat tyre. He has got back into the peloton. So it could be important for him, that, because today could be a day for Zabel as well. Just taking our motorbike through the peloton here now. There is Zabel. You must have heard us talking about him here in the white jersey, champion of Germany for the second time in his career as a professional. And we are looking at the same race, by the way, as before we went to commercial break. But just like magic, Bob, in the last 5 minutes, the sun has come out. It looks like a summer's day.
Well, they were taking off the arm warmers and the rain capes. Hopefully the clouds don't move back in for the riders, because then the domestiques will have to go back to the cars again and collect all the rain capes and bring them back.
You know
it's
it
very
well,
hard
don't
work.
you know it well.
I know it quite well. And when you have a petulant star on your team that's always changing his mind whether or not he wants warm clothes or take them off, you spend your whole race going back and forth to the team car, dropping off the rain clothes.
Yes, that always amuses me when the poor old domestiques have to work just as hard as the stars, because to fight your way through this peloton carrying somebody else's drinks or gloves or clothing or arm warmers is quite a tough number. And just as you get there, he changes his mind and wants something else. Back you go again. There's the length of the peloton, which is a good sign that they're taking this breakaway very seriously now, and it is coming down inside 2 minutes, a minute 54, so another 25 seconds, and Angel Vicioso will not be the race leader on the road. On the left of our picture is the breakaway. Rabobank had a terrible day yesterday. All of their riders so far behind. The only man that saved them any face at all was their former mountain biker, Michael Rasmussen, who finished up with the lead group. But of course they all fell back to see if they could salvage anything out of Levi Leipheimer, who was clearly lacking the racing miles after his nasty crash in the Tour de France.
Well, this has been a very fast race so far. The average speed, it's a bit early to start talking about a fast Vuelta a España, but the average speed so far is 44 kilometers an hour. And the first hour of racing today was covered at 46.5 kilometers an hour. I think it's important maybe to note that this is the race of all the 3 Grand Tours that has the shortest average individual stages. In races like the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France, the average stage is around about 160 kilometers or 100 miles in length. But at the Tour of Spain, the average length is only 140 kilometers, which is just around about 90 miles. And I think this reflects in the way the riders attack every day at the Vuelta a España and the high speeds that we see recorded out on the course.
Yes, and that's absolutely right, Paul. And at this time of the year, of course, the riders prefer the shorter stages, as they're just trying to tweak those legs at the end of a long and tiring season in preparation for the World Road Race Championships in October. And some of the big names like Armstrong and Ulrich and Tyler Hamilton have already decided to put an end to the season, although Armstrong does want to win in San Francisco next weekend. We'll take another break anyway. See you in a moment. And welcome back as the riders course through the city of San Miguel now as they head towards the finish. They've still got 50 kilometers plus to race, and they've still got to work out how they're going to close down about 1 minute and 50 seconds on those 4 breakaways. Angel Vicioso, Unai Echeverria, Constantino Zabaya and Beat Zaberg are the 4 riders who got away today after just 19 kilometers of racing. 2 riders have retired, Nicola Gavazzi of Seiko and David Plaza of Team Bianchi, out with a very nasty toothache to say the least. But look at this now, latest time check on our global positioning system, 1 minute 29 seconds. So it's not going to be too long now before they start to sense those 4 riders are coming back into the fold.
Big advantage for the chasers as well in the main field is the weather has completely changed. It was absolutely pouring down at the start this morning, but as we've progressed further towards the coast and the finish in Santander, we have seen the fact that the weather has started to improve. 42 kilometers to go, distancia a meta, meaning the distance to go to the finishing line. And as you can see, it's white jerseys on the front, and that is the team of Alessandro Patacchi. 1 or 2 riders mixing it in there as well, the riders of Jan Svorada. So I think we'll be setting ourselves up for a royal sprint finish when we get down to the end. And it's still rather important for the Once riders to try and make sure they are well up to the front end of the main field, because 4 of those Once riders are all in the same time at the top of the leaderboard. We're now just going through the town of Torrelavega, and that's just outside of 25 miles to go to the finish.
That's Torrelavega for the chasing group here. Now there is a small, not too far away from the Alto de la Montaña. It's only a 3rd category climb, but I think it's here where the peloton will turn the screw that little bit tighter and try to get the gap closed down. When they go over the top of Montaña, they have just 38 kilometers to race to the finish, and they descend from 200 meters very quickly down to almost sea level as they run just 20 meters above sea level all the way into the finish. And so it is going to be a tight one, and the sprinters know that this is not a great race for them this year. Mario Cipollini spotted it pretty early because he retired before the start of the 2nd stage yesterday.
He certainly did. The 2 climbs we'll go over today are just 3rd categories, and they're not really very high at 390 meters and 220 metres, and an ideal position for these riders who are actually starting here on the first kilometres of the climb. And the man who should be enjoying this situation right now is the man in the yellow jersey at the back there, Angel Vicioso. He's the highest place in the overall classification. Just in front of him there is Beat Zeberg in the orange jersey of Rabobank. A little further up is Unai Echevarria, and the man setting the pacemaking is attacker number 1, I would say, at this year's Vuelta a España, and that is Zabaya.
Well, as they go round that roundabout again, they all come back together. Not for warmth now, because the weather has warmed up quite nicely now as they head down to what we'll hope will be a nice dry sprint, because it's always dangerous in the wet, as we know from the crash that took out Mario Cipollini in the Giro d'Italia this year, and it was only 2 days ago when he actually rode his first race since that crash. That was only to qualify his team, Domino Vacanzi, into the race, and of course his very early exit has really upset the organisation, hasn't it?
It's caused a bit of a storm, really, with Unipublic, the people who organise not only the Vuelta a España, but other races throughout the year as well in Spain, races like the Tour of Valencia and, of course, the Tour of Catalonia. And in fact, they are threatening the possibility of excluding Domino Vacanzi from any race that they organise on Spanish soil. So I think that's something that the organisers of the Domino Vacanzi team really need to come and try and look after over the next few months, because it really has left an awful lot of bad blood. Mario Cipollini coming down here and pulling out after just 28 kilometres of racing.
I think it's a little bit unkind, Bob, because although I understand how the organisation feel, they feel that Mario Cipollini is not quite playing the game. In fairness, this is a very good team without Mario Cipollini.
Absolutely. They win races consistently throughout the year. They have a number of good athletes. Giovanni Lombardi, almost as fast in his own right as Mario Cipollini, is always a factor in the sprints when he's not leading out Cipollini. I like the Domino Vacanzi team. They're a very solid outfit. They get a lot of criticism because of Mario Cipollini's antics, but I don't think the rest of the team should be lumped in with them. Ivan Quaranta even rode less of the Vuelta a España, dropping out after 3 kilometers. I didn't see too much criticism directed at Saeco because of that.
And they've lost 2 men now.
Just Quaranta himself. So a little bit unfair, I think, to lump the whole team in with some of Cipollini's shenanigans.
Well, the sprinters teams have got the head of the race here. Telecom, Lampre, Alessio, all got good sprinters on their squad if they can catch up with those leaders. No longer is the virtual leader on the road, Angel Vicioso, because we've now come inside a minute 19, so he's lost what chance he had of sighting the golden jersey. And the riders now beginning to take control, as we thought they would, on the steady slopes here, this third category climb. It takes them up it's quite a hard little climb, because it goes from 30 metres up to 200 before we top out, and then begin gradually descending virtually to sea level as we run into Santander.
Just on the right-hand side there, in the yellow helmet and the blue jersey, is one of the Once riders. He leads the combine competition. It's a competition we don't see very much in the sport of professional cycling anymore. It's an addition of your positions in all of the different classifications. That's Isidro Nozal wearing that jersey today, and he's the local rider thinking about the possibility of getting himself the lead. And for the first time today, Angel Vicioso has moved away from being the actual leader on the road, because the time gap has come down to around about the 1 minute mark, 1 minute and 7 seconds to be exact. So the man there just at the back in 4th position, Angel Vicioso, losing his lead out on the open road, and that must almost certainly get wiped out, I would say, Phil, over the next 5 to 10 kilometres or so.
Incidentally, the man that won yesterday, Luis Perez, he was in the early action today. Just before the breakaway went, he sat up and they kept going. Luis Perez won the first climb of the day, so he has slightly increased his lead in the King of the Mountains competition. Felix Cardenas was second there, and David Miller, trying to make amends for losing 17 minutes yesterday, went over in 3rd place. But I think he was more involved in the lead out for his teammate Perez, who got maximum points, which means that Perez will pull on the leader's jersey, which is a strange orange colour, by the way. Not a polka dot jersey as in the Tour de France, but I have to tell you there is a polka dot jersey exactly the same as the Tour de France, but it's given to the points leader here.
Just to quickly finish on Perez, he's actually he has a nickname. His nickname is El Chollo, which means a piece of cake, and that's given to him by the other bike riders, because they reckon if they get into a breakaway with him, they're almost certainly going to win. It has been said as well that he hasn't got any other victories until yesterday, but in fact we've got him down with 3 victories total. A small win earlier this season and a criterium win last year in Pamplona.
Yes, well, we'll always fall out with the statisticians as we go over the top here, with a win there for Unai Echevarria, so he'll get the small points. because it's a question of what races do you count as wins. Some of the organisations don't count these circuit races, some don't count non-UCI races, etc. But we'll no doubt face up to that when I tell you that we have Pataki winning 21 races this year. Most records have only 20. We'll take a break. See you in a moment. And welcome back. Third day of the Tour of Spain. We are about just over 20 miles, 23 miles from the finish now, and the gap is down for the 4 riders now to just on 1 minute, 60 scant seconds. It looks to me as though we might have picked up 1 or 2 passengers in the breakaway now, because Zaberg, who's third in line here, has spent the last few minutes chasing to catch up with the front 2 pacemakers. Vicioso, he's the policeman, remember, on the Once team for the men who are on top of the leaderboard, 4 equal on time, right at the top of the leaderboard. He'll do nothing to damage them.
Victor and Carlos will be pleased to see the progress of the Vuelta a España today. I'm talking about Victor Vargas and Carlos Castañeda. These are the next 2 villages that we will go through.
Right, okay, so I must confess then, Bob, I was looking for the rider in the race called Vargas, but apparently it's the next village down the road. That'll be at 33 kilometres to go, it's just over 20 miles. And it's turned out to be quite a pleasant day now after the rather bad start, and in fact rain was forecast right through the stage.
It was, but fortunately we are on the coast and the weather can change quite dramatically, and it has done, and these riders now almost certainly realise that they will get caught very shortly indeed, because inside of 1 minute the teams of the sprinters now know that they've got their prey almost in sight.
And then we're going to see a real bit of push and shove as the sprinters try to get to the front for the big battle of Santander today. Because there are some very good sprinters in this race, and because we don't have the big icons apart from Pataki and Zabel, and then of course we are going to see a lot of riders believing in themselves and believe they can get a victory in the sprint. 38 seconds is the gap as the riders now are beginning to split up here, and there's a little group trying to get away here at 38 seconds. One of the Seiko riders launched an attack. I don't think it's my old mate Juan Puentes, who told me this year that he started cycling because he watched the Tour de France on television in Australia.
Well, it's seen around the world nowadays, and he's covered there. It looks very much as if it's the large figure of Georgi Hincapie looking for the move as well. So Hincapie very attentive. A long season for George, having suffered a parasite towards the early start of the season, which the team had a hard time finding out just exactly what was wrong with him. But once they did, they were able to get that problem cleared up quite quickly. He had a parasite in his intestines, which took an awful lot of testing to find out just exactly what the problem was. It was originally thought it was a viral infection. He was treated on a number of occasions by antibiotics, and finally, just after the classic season had been put to bed, Hincapie found his form and started riding well in the Tour, in the Dauphiné, and then obviously we saw him ride superbly in the Tour de France.
Yes, he actually became a bit of a climber in this year's Tour de France, staying up amongst Lance Armstrong and the teams nearly towards the end of the big mountains. In fact, he went over the Tourmalet alongside Lance, I seem to remember. Well, sun is out, racing is pretty fast right now, and it looks as though they've regrouped here now, because these boys are driving now, and driving very quickly, because there are a number of good sprinters in this race. Cipollini, of course, didn't even start yesterday, and he had a real rough time too in the team time trial. Couldn't hang on the small climb, but then neither could Ivan Caranta, who actually abandoned the race after just 3.5 kilometres. And I can't imagine, if you're a professional, what you tell your team management. And think of the poor old first reserve who wasn't able to ride.
Well, in fact, Quaranta, just to give him a little bit of defence, in fact was involved in a training accident just before the Tour of Spain. I'm not sure if it was after he'd signed in, and that would have been the reason why the team weren't able to replace him at the last possible moment. And it wouldn't be the first time that somebody's been on the verge of starting a major stage race, because I think the guy sitting alongside us here was about to start the Tour de France a few years ago and crashed on the stage called the Preface, which didn't actually count.
Oh dear, Bob. What happened?
Well, I think Guido Bontempi is counting it because they gave him the yellow jersey that day. So I'm sure if you look at Guido Bontempi's mantle place, he'll have his only yellow jersey up there. And
honorary yellow jersey.
He was able to start. You crashed him.
Is an honorary yellow jersey any worse than a regular one?
Absolutely not.
No.
But anyway, let's tell the
go.
story. Bob actually crashed in the Preface, wasn't able to start the Tour de France proper, and it was rather an interesting story because the team tried to contact a replacement overnight, and the replacement was a New Zealand rider called Nathan Dahlberg, who they actually found very late on in the evening. He caught an overnight train down to start the Tour de France and started the first stage out on the open road, and in fact with hardly any preparation at all, Dahlberg finished the Tour that year.
Well, if I remember rightly, Nathan was down the local supermarket getting the weekend shopping. When he got home, his wife said, "Nathan, you're riding the Tour de France. You're on this plane at 6 o'clock." He had to run out of the house and fly to the start, and Bob was on the flight going the other way, unfortunately. But it wasn't your fault, though, the crash, I hope, Bob.
No, a spectator stepped out on the course, and the moment I looked down to change gears, he stepped out on the course. I never even saw him. Creamed right into the back of this man, laid him out, jacked up my knee, had a concussion, was unable to complete the distance. Jean-Marie Leblanc felt very bad because they had added the race after the UCI told them they couldn't have a race on that day. So a bit of a disaster in my career. I don't think I'll ever live that down, especially with you two guys.
No, well, we're not going to ever let you forget it, Bob. I mean, that's why you're alongside us here with all these lovely stories. So we're looking down at the peloton. There's the polka dot jersey, but of course it's not the King of the Mountains, the polka dot jersey. It is in fact the points competition. As we look through here at the peloton, and not very long now before they wipe out the leaders. So, well, if you missed any stages of the Vuelta, then tune in to OLN every Thursday night and catch up with the latest inside OLN's Summer Sports Zone. We'll feature highlights, news and results from domestic and international road cycling and, of course, mountain biking. Every Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. So the peloton getting themselves all together, preparing for what is now a bunch sprint. Just a little matter of 57 seconds to solve before they can settle in. When we come back, they'll be about 18 miles from the finish. Welcome back. The 96 miles are almost done. We've got about 18 and 19 of them left to run to the finish, and the pressure's really gone on at the front now. I think Paul are getting a little bit anxious now. They need to finish this breakaway off.
They want to bring them back into the fold. A quick glimpse there of the Velocidad, the speed, 48 kilometers an hour at the front end of the main field at the moment, and the last time check we got was well inside of the 1 minute mark. You can see a lot of teams moving forward here right now. Obviously the majority of the work being done by Alessandro Petacchi's team, and once they get out to the straighter parts of the course, they will see these riders finally, and look at the difference in the speed. There you can see the onboard computer indicating that the group here of 4 riders is pushing it up to 50 kilometers an hour. It must be going downhill.
Yeah, I think it is going downhill because they were doing 44 a few seconds ago, but they are trying desperately now to survive to the end. It won't be a run-in which will favour the escapers once they're down in sight of the breakaways, of the main field rather. I think the roads are drying out nicely, so they should be warming up for the big occasion. Chance for the sprinters. Petacchi isn't the only good sprinter in this race. We have Eric Zabel here as well, although I don't think he's quite got the speed of Alessandro Petacchi, but there are plenty of other good riders here who can produce. Furlan particularly is one of those. We've got Julian Dean, the Kiwi, who used to be on USP, now riding here on CSC. Maybe Tom Bonan can put in a good sprint, or Usov. There's the situation at the result of the mountain we saw earlier. Echeverria going over ahead of Beat Zeberg, Zabaya and Vicioso. Still the 4 men out front. Zeberg, soon after crossing the line, sat up, and then he found he had to do a lot of work to catch up on the way down because the other 3 didn't seem to slow down.
Another man who might cause a surprise in the sprint towards the end as well could be Tom Boonen. I was actually rather happy to see him in that leading group yesterday when we went over that first category climb. We haven't seen a lot of him this year. He's been kept in reserve. He switched across during last year's transfer season from US Postal to ride for the Belgian team. And they're just in the distance, that long straightaway. You can see that small gaggle of cars. Well, that's the leading group of 4 riders, and the time difference between the 2 groups right now, Phil, cannot be very much more than 25 or 30 seconds.
And off to the right, we can see the chaos when you're not riding the Vuelta Espana, because the main highway there, all the traffic is stopped while the peloton makes their way through. Many of those cars will have stopped to see the race, in fact, rather than because they had to. It looks as though they'll be caught at around about 25 kilometres to go today. That leaves plenty of time to organise the peloton and get the sprinters up towards the front end of the race. Here's Zeberg. himself not a bad finisher, not quite as fast as his brother perhaps, but not a bad finisher. If he was allowed to sprint, he probably would have given Angel Vicioso a run for his money here today, but I don't think it's going to happen, because although they're not slowing down one iota in the distance there, Bob, I think it's the catch not far away.
I think if they look behind themselves, our riders from the breakaway, they would see the peloton flying up behind them, led at the moment by the Fossa Bortolo team. I think that the burden of responsibility for chasing the breakaway and leading out the sprint will rest on their shoulders, because they do have Alessandro Pataki, the fastest man, Sergei Ivanov and Vladimir Gustov very fast, and his final leadout guy, the erstwhile American Guido Trenti, has an American racing license but not an American passport. He's an Italian citizen. I don't think he speaks English at all.
He speaks no English. In fact, I tried to speak to him once, and the only thing we had in common was he claimed to be an English speaker by racing license only.
There you go.
We've
that
just
gives
seen
him eligibility for the World Championships, however.
Well, I mean,
one of these days, you never know. It might.
How many riders find ports of convenience when they want to make sure they get on a team for the World Championships? Because to qualify on the Italian squadron is a very, very difficult thing. Even though you'll get 12 riders in a team, there are a lot more than 12 world-class bike riders who would qualify in any other country to ride in the World Championships. So make the most of your routes, that's what I say.
When we look at the UCI points that each nation garners at the end of each season, the Italians are many thousands of points ahead of any other country in the world. An incredible amount of great bike racers.
Well, one man who's found a serious port in a storm when it comes to taking advantage of his nationality is Maximilian Chiandri, the Italian-British rider. He got a bronze medal in 1996 in the Olympic Games riding for Great Britain. I think he was very happy about this swap over. Born in the United Kingdom in Derby, but basically very much an Italian in his lifestyle.
Absolutely, and speaks both languages fluently. And we claim him certainly in the British press when he wins a stage of the Tour de France. And he's certainly very much English. Yes, born in Derby, as Paul said. He moved over to Italy, I think, when he was 6 years of age. But I think is it his father still lives in the States?
His father still lives outside of San Francisco. In fact, Los Angeles.
He'll be watching us as we speak.
It could very well be. He has a couple of Italian restaurants down there.
Well, the peloton altogether losing only 2 riders today that we know of. I don't think many riders have been dropped, if any at all, here, because they've been a pretty regular ride down the coastline as we race now towards Santander. Of course, we're heading very much closer to the Pyrenees, and we will go into France and have one stage finish on French soil in a couple of days' time in Cauterets. Be a tough finish. Miguel Indurain triumphed there before he started winning the Tour de France as a young rider in the Tour. And the last man I can remember winning there would be Richard Virenque, sadly on the day when we lost Fabio Casatelli in that crash on the Col de Porte d'Aspet. So we're looking now at some hard work now, because clearly Fossa Bortolo have every confidence that the powerhouse Alessandro Pataki will get win number 22 of the year and win number 11 of stages in the Grand Tours this year. He's certainly the man to beat, but you know, Giovanni Lombardi, he is a man who could take him on.
He certainly would like to, and would like to wipe away the cloud surrounding the team's participation. Domino Vacanzi. You can see the difference now between the Escapados and the peloton is down inside of 30 seconds, 27 seconds to be exact, and it is coming down rather rapidly. A quick reminder of what the finishing run-in is like. The last three kilometres. In fact, with 3 kilometres to go, there's a slight uphill drag before it then sort of levels off, and there is a then slight descent into a final finishing bend at 250 metres to go.
The worrying thing, of course, is that the big team sprinters and the lead-out trains won't be as prominent here as they are in the Tour de France. Can make for a very, very exciting finish. All ahead of us, we'll just take another break. And welcome back, and just in time by the looks of it, because the peloton are right up behind the 4 breakaways. We are now in the town of Saron, 23 kilometres to go to the finish. They've been away since the 19th kilometre of the day, but it is all over now, and it's down to the sprinters. Looks like Jan Zverada's Lampre team are pulling them back. First team, followed by Fossa Bortolo. as we look down there we are, 23 kilometres to go. Now there is a sprint in the town here. Now the sprints don't carry any time bonuses. It's an entering competition purely for those that want to get mixed up in it, Bob. But at the moment it's going to be all for all. I'm presuming we will see the banner, but I must confess it looks as though we're now leaving the town.
A lot of publicity out there by the side of the road, and as the riders get to the intermediate sprints, the publicity banners are lined up there, so I think we'll see it here in a few hundred meters for the peloton. Pretty fast tempo right now. It would surprise me to see one of our very fast sprinters go for this intermediate sprint because we want to save every ounce of energy for the final burst to the line.
Been a very fast stage as well. In fact, over the 154-kilometre route, over the first hour of racing, the riders covered 46 kilometres and 44 kilometres covered in the second hour. It's a very fast Tour of Spain so far, and I think many of the riders today, Phil, will be thinking about getting through the mountains and heading down towards the south, where they should get still fairly good summer-type weather. A lot of work now being done on the front by Alessio. That's the team of Angelo Forlan. He's a very good sprinter. We've seen him here at the Vuelta a Espana before. But I tell you one thing, this main field is hammering along right now, well in excess of 35 miles an hour.
Well, just look at the peloton there. I don't think we've missed the sprint. I certainly haven't seen it, but we're in the hands of the Spanish organisers. Let's have a look where we are here. They don't actually show the sprints on all of their publicity, by the way. We are 22 kilometres in the end, so I think we must have passed it by somewhere, or they cancelled it. But the race now concentrating on the big prize for the finish, and well, the sprinters now going to feel they have a real good shot here, and those who aren't going to get mixed up should be well advised to get out of the way here, because you've got to watch for this traffic furniture here now, these little traffic islands. You've got to keep your wits about you. You follow very closely the wheel in front. You put a lot of faith in the rider up ahead of you as well. So the field still all together, and the policeman there waving his arms furiously. Now then, looking for something to watch at 10 p.m? OLN at 10 brings you the latest shows on the network. Tune in Monday through Wednesday for shows like Beach Ambush, Bragging Rights, Mysterious Encounters and Outdoor Outtakes. The new lineup begins on September the 29th at 10 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. Now then, Bob, pick a winner. Because you're always right.
Alessandro Petacchi.
Oh,
all the way.
So boring. Paul, pick a winner for goodness sake.
Unbelievable, Bob. At the Tour de France, he always wanted to pick Lance Armstrong, and when he gets a chance, he goes straight for Alessandro Petacchi. 10 wins in the Grand Tours this year, 6 at the Tour of Italy, 4 at the Tour de France, and probably a great favourite here. Well,
Never
I suppose
takes
if,
risk, Bob, does
if Bob's going to take Petacchi, well, I've got to take Eric Zabel.
Good lad. Well, I'm going to take...
Don't take David Miller, please.
All right, I won't take David Miller. He let me down badly yesterday, losing 17 minutes, and that'll teach him to have his hair dyed blonde for this race. I think I'll go for Giovanni Lombardi today, and maybe Angel Edo, because he's sprinting quite well. I'm not sure he's in the class, though, of Petacchi.
There's so many sprinters out on the opening roads for the first time, and it's always a very nervous moment for the sprinters. You can see their work that's been done by Petacchi's team. They've done an awful lot of pacemaking to bring back that breakaway, and they may well have a very difficult time trying to control the race down towards the end. And let's throw another name into the mix as well. Why not? Because, you know, George Hincapie used to be a very good bunch sprinter in his early career.
That's when he's not being disqualified.
When he's not being disqualified, as he was in the Homestead on a stage of the Tour du Pont, hands coming off the handlebars in a very fast 40-mile-an-hour downhill sprint. A bit of a dangerous sprint, and George was only 19 years old at the time. And I think in the latter part of this season, not having done all the classics, I think Hincapie might still have something under the belt to try and get a win for US Postal.
Should never have been disqualified, but I happen to know the chief commissaire, a personal friend of mine. He disqualified him, so I better not get involved in that. But I'm sure he's not watching OLM because he lives in a different country. Looking down, that was a long time ago, Paul. I didn't realise you were that old. But George Hincapie now, of course, has progressed to become a really class bike rider, having won, I think it was last year or the year before, Ghent Wevelgem. 20 kilometres to go. Now, as we're looking here at dry roads, I can tell you that the drizzle has started falling at the finish. Now, that could make a very different finish. This is not like the Tour of Italy or the Tour de France. It is a much different bike race. A lot of guys here, Bob, will believe they can win a stage at the finish.
Yes, absolutely. Like you said, George Hincapie coming in with some fresh legs. That's something about Eric Zabel that he almost never has. He's always been dependent on his pure power because he races from January 1st all the way through Christmas every single year. So it's always a question, who has the freshest legs? I think George Hincapie has a solid chance. Was a fearless sprinter when he was a new professional.
Yeah.
He's become a really good domestique for Lance Armstrong because that's the imperative imperative of the team. That takes a little bit of the sting out of the legs a lot of times when you do mile after mile on the front of the peloton in one of the Grand Tours. It tends to take away a little bit of your sprint. But George, very fired up about this bike race, I can assure you. He's trying to do a good race here to prepare for the World Championships. And the way he was climbing in the Tour, I'm going to put him down as one of the early favorites for the World Championships in Ontario, Canada.
Gosh, I thought for a moment you were going to change your mind and not go for Pataki the way you were talking there, Bob.
Well, the Alessio riders are on the front, so I might have to change over to Angelo Forlan here.
Well, just briefly about Hincapie, if he does get a win today, it'll be his first win since 2001. The thing about Hincapie is he does a lot of effort, Phil, in the one-day classics, and it is so difficult to win races like Paris-Roubaix or the Tour of Flanders that Hincapie really rides to finish high up there in those races, and maybe today he'll take a little bit of pleasure out of trying to get himself a stage win.
Well, he's been such a loyal supporter of Lance Armstrong, and he rides by Lance so much in the tours that matter, the Tour de France for Lance. The field racing towards the finish in a hurry. We'll take a break and we won't miss much of the action. See you in a moment. And welcome back. Well, it always happens in the commercial break. They just had a little bit of a shunt here. The two riders wrestling with their bikes are Gutierrez and the long breakaway rider, Constantino Zabaya, who seems to have a chain problem. This is Navas, also trying to rejoin, I think. Or is he trying to get off the front at the moment? He's trying to get off the front. We've had pictures too of Bobby Julich. He was also delayed by that crash. Didn't seem to fall, but got his bike back in order. He too is chasing. And this is Navas now trying to get away in the confusion. But the field are on him very, very sharply. Well, it didn't seem a very serious fall. It just seemed a tangle of the men who just came to a gentle halt.
Well, two riders at the back end of the main field, and they may well have just been chatting, the two riders from Kelme, and they locked handlebars together and went down pretty rapidly. But that's not the place to ride when you're charging into town like this. Navas, just a slight advantage, but the sprinters' teams are being very attentive right now. They want to make sure that there are no last-minute attacks because they want to really charge in towards the finishing line. 15 kilometers to go right now, 9.5 miles of racing left.
About 20 minutes, that's all now at the speed these boys are travelling at today, and trying to reorganise themselves. We do get these little shunts at this most crucial stage of the race, the excitement of it all, as riders try to move into gaps which aren't always there, as there now come the traditional attacks in the hope that they can spoil the fun. This is Vina Calderola having a little go now. Well, Freddy Rodriguez is one of the riders on this team. This isn't Fred on the attack, by the way, but it is a rider who might be trying to loosen up the opposition.
David de la Fuente from Spain, one of the Spanish riders on this squad. He's managed to get a small advantage over the group. He's a long way down in the overall classification. He's lost himself almost 15 minutes in just 3 days of racing. These are the flurries of attacks as we try to charge in towards town, and this is the thing that really starts to annoy the sprinters' teams because they're trying to sit on the front end of the peloton right now, keeping the pace at around about 50 kilometers an hour. The idea is that they want to make sure that there are no last-minute attacks, because these tend to really bother the sprinters, don't they, Bob? Because it causes a bit of disgruntlement in the front end of the peloton.
Well, each one of the helpers for the sprinters have to work just that much harder, taking away the concentration on the pure lead out of the sprint to chase down these lone breakaways. It happens a lot more in the Vuelta a Espana, it seems, than the Tour and in the Giro. Most of the peloton there content when it's going to be a sprint not to attack. We very rarely see a rider with enough power to attack in the closing kilometers when the group is all together and stay away to the finish. But in the Vuelta a España, I think it happens more often than the other two Grand Tours.
Well, David de la Fuente's got himself a pretty serious advantage right now, around about 200 meters, but with 15 kilometers to go, it takes an awfully special bike rider to be able to hold off a main field at speeds like this. The only man that really in recent years has been able to make this kind of success on an attack is Yaroslav Ekimov, who was an unbelievable bike rider during the Tour de France this year, and not riding, in fact, riding one or two-man time trials towards the end of this season.
Well, and he won, of course, the Tour of Holland, which is a fabulous win for Yaroslav Ekimov. We're in the streets of Santander now, but they're rather long streets here. We've got 8 kilometers of them before we get to the finishing line. The peloton is split, and a bit unfortunate for the riders on the left, because it looks to be a pretty solid central reservation just now, and they're going to have to continue to race on the wrong side. This will be... Go on, Paul, yeah.
Well, just looking from the helicopter, it actually looked like a blue jersey going on the attack on the left-hand side, and I was wondering if it wasn't a last-minute burst by George Hincapie as we now go inside the the intermediary sprint here. This is at around about 140 kilometers covered, and you can see the little bit of confusion caused on the front end of the main field by the fact that some of the riders actually went over towards the left-hand side of the road.
Not just by the riders either, but by the commentators too, because that sprint should have been at Saron, quite a few kilometres back, but it looks like they've moved it onto the edge of Santander. Doesn't matter, it's not a time bonus sprint in the Tour of Spain, as the riders now getting their chance here to regroup as one big peloton and try and hunt down the brave escaper here from Vina Calderola, a team which takes the name of Saunier Duval here in Spain.
I have a feeling that is Hincapie, just looking at the style of that rider leading the charge on the front end of the main field. In fact, the acceleration has almost pulled De La Fuente back into the fold, but the main field very quickly on the tails of all of these attackers right now.
Now, I'm just wondering, I can't believe that US Postal are thinking of a stage win here. Surely not, because they're looking to protect Heras, who's very high up overall, of course. No time bonuses, so the riders, if they finish across the line in a pack, they all get the same time, which means we're game. We would look for the best Once rider of those top 4 overall. And the drizzle has turned now, as you can see, into rather heavy rain, which is a bit unfortunate, just as we're getting towards the finish, Bob, because you see the wind has come. Now this is blowing straight in off the sea here.
Well, these riders have to be very careful in the finale now. All the GC guys will want to get very close to the front. I think we'll see a bunch of Postal riders at the front, a bunch of Once guys now, mixing it up with the sprinters teams because of the rain coming down. All the team managers will know that. The Soigneurs will call the car, tell the team captains to get to the front of the bike race. So in case there are any gaps, any crashes in the finale when the streets get wet, and here's one right now.
Well, there's the first
and
one.
That's exactly what we're talking about. You have to be at the very front of the bike race constantly for 3 weeks. That's why it's so beautiful. That's Gerrit Glomser from the Saeco team, and so dangerous.
Yeah, last winner of the Tour of Austria for the past 2 years, and he's gone down. He only came in as a last-minute entry for Saeco. We were all rather surprised to see him on the lineup. He doesn't look too happy to get going again either. Cofidis rider just gone through there too, already off the back. And they're only getting the sample of the rain here because it's raining really heavy at the finishing line. It's blowing in off the ocean. It's coming towards them, as we can now see now. And this has been a change at the front now, because this is now Milanese at the front. I think it's Pedro Cardoso. Is it, Paul, who's gone clear?
Renato Silva, I think, has gone off the front.
Silva.
And this is in the confusion that's going on at the front end of the main field right now. The front end of the main field is now being controlled by the Once riders, and the reason for that, as Bob mentioned, is that the team leaders, the men trying to win this bike race overall, do not want to get involved in any crashes on the run in towards the finish. So Gonzalez de Galdiano, Nozal and Rodriguez, the current leader, will be riding in the first 15 to 20 places. And I think this is a good point to remind everybody that with 250 meters to go, there's a sweeping right-hand bend towards the finish, and it was on a sweeping bend like that Mario Cipollini went out on a stage of the Giro d'Italia earlier this year.
In the heavy rain, Robbie McEwen dodged through, stayed upright and won the stage. Now, as we're looking down at the peloton, trying to control this one rider from Milanese, the breakaway rider here, to keep him in touch. It's going to be tough. That, I think, is the 10-kilometer to go banner. So they're just 6 miles from the finish now, and I have to tell them the rain is going to get heavier as they inch their way towards the finish. This is going to be a very dicey finish now. We won't miss much of it, but we'll just take another short break. Join us very shortly. And welcome back. Well, we're rejoining the action now, just on 7 kilometres from the finish, says Nina. I think we're a bit closer than that, in fact. The field are absolutely flying here now. And at 50 kilometres an hour, 1 or 2 riders are certain to take risks because the weather is closing right in at the worst possible time.
Just on the right-hand side, a quick glimpse of the white jersey of the German champion, Eric Zabel, riding towards the front end of the main field. His team not helping him in the lead out for the moment. In fact, all of the white jerseys of Fassa Bortolo and Alessandro Patacchi's team have disappeared off the front end. They've been replaced by the yellow jerseys of Team Once. They want to keep their leaders right to the front end of the main field because there's always the possibility at any time on these run-ins of a crash and a silly loss of time, which is the important thing about a 3-week bike race, not to lose any time at all on these flat stages like this.
Well, this is the industrial side of Santander now as we race towards the finishing line. Once is still there, well placed indeed, because Once is thinking now they have still the 4 possible leaders of this tour on 0 time. So the highest placed of them It go to count back on stage finishes over the past 3 days. One of them will take the golden jersey. I don't think anybody's going to get separatized now. There's some nasty wheel dodging going on there.
Pink jersey there, that was Jans Verade, very much to the front end of the main field. There is Erik Zabel. This is the kind of sprint that Zabel would really enjoy. And there is Hincapie, very much to the front end of the main field. And US Postal Service are doing an excellent job keeping him up. But look at these run-ins here. These traffic roundabouts are very dangerous for the riders, and this change of direction is very often where the accidents happen.
Fortunately, that's a nice sweeping bend on the inside of that roundabout. Matthew White of US Postal was the rider at the sharp end of the race there. So quite clearly, Bob, US Postal have got ambitions today.
Well, you can see just how serious they are to keep Roberto Heras out of trouble and maybe even do a little lead out for George Hincapie if he's feeling that strong. Pataki, Zabel, Zvorada in a little bit different class at this point in George's career. However, you can see a bit of confusion there. That is a disaster. This is the roundabouts here all over Europe now, creating so much havoc in the bike race. I think those guys lost half of the peloton in position there. But at the front of the peloton, 4 or 5 of the Postal guys doing a huge lead out right now, 6.5 Ks to the finish, just keeping Roberto Heras out of trouble. Very nervous stays. All the Once riders, they are so powerful, and they've brought their leader, De Gondiano and Rodriguez, up to the front now.
Well, that's Matthew White of US Postal looking over his shoulder to see who's with him, and it looks though George Hincapie still got the wheel there. 6 kilometres to go now. Once also trying to bring the charge in as well, but others taking the chance to move up on the left of our picture now. It looks like Kelme trying to get in, of Phonak. They also have a reasonable sprinter on the team. Angeledo is also moving through on Milanese. Now we're onto the seafront here. The road is absolutely soaking. The downpour really has come at just the wrong time.
It's important at a stage like this as well to have the correct tyre pressures. If your tyres are too hard, as they very often are on the drier stages, that's when they become almost impossible to keep a machine upright. I would think because of the fact it's been raining for most of the day, many of these riders will have the right pressures in. But the white lines you can see on these European roads are treacherous when you come into a town like this, because of the fact that they normally also have a slight coating of diesel on the top of them as well, which really makes it almost impossible to keep a bike upright. But it's absolute chaos all through this peloton right now. These guys at the front, inside of 5 kilometers to go right now, are trying to stay on the front end of the peloton. They don't want to touch their brakes. If you touch your brakes at a moment like this, you can slip from 5th place to 55th place, and a sprinter does not want to do that.
But it is remarkable how much work US Postal are now putting in here to try and bring this race to a satisfactory conclusion as far as they are concerned. They've still got control of the head of the peloton. Pataki may not want to get mixed up in this one because it's getting to be a little bit dangerous. 4.5 kilometers to go. These two boys from US Postal working very hard. Matthew White coming through now to take over, always checking to see where the rest of the team is. The rest of the riders are just fanning out behind. At least the boulevards are wide. A nice, steady, sweeping bend, not going to throw them off too much. It's a roundabout, in fact. The whole peloton, though, becoming a little bit preoccupied, apart from the first 20 men.
Well, Hincapie's in about 5th position right now. Right on his wheel, though, is Erik Zabel, and there was a white train of Fassa Bortolo riders trying to move up just on the inside, and they may well be trying to move Alessandro Pataki right to the front. There you can see the kilometres ticking by at the moment. They're covering these final kilometres at around about 1 minute and 5 seconds. That's well up there towards 40 miles an hour. The place not to be right now, Bob, is certainly in the last 20 places.
Absolutely not. That's the last place you want to be. If you're going to try to contend for a 3-week bike race, that's why it's so nerve-wracking for the big stars of the sport. They have to stay right in the hornet's nest at the front of the peloton.
Tricky change of direction coming up here now. The rider's going to swing around to the right here, and they're coming into it at a very, very quick speed here now, in excess of 50 kilometers an hour. Our helicopter just closing down on them. It looks as though they're safely around the bend here. That bunch is stretching like a piece of elastic with the gaps between the wheels. The spray coming off the rear wheels now as the rider's having difficulty, no doubt, in seeing who is just in front of them and what is happening at the head. Erik Zabel is moving up, though, on the right of our picture, which has gone a little bit out of focus at the moment. But as he get it back in line now, look at the spray coming off these wheels. This is going to be a desperate finish. Pataki is getting into the mix now.
Well, there you can see there's a big lead out now by the US Postal Service. There is Erik Zabel there in about 7th position, right on the wheel of Alessandro Pataki. Acceleration now coming from Bianchi, but it's complete chaos. Team men are looking round there to see where their leaders are for the moment, because everybody wants to make sure as they come into the final 3 kilometers right now that their team leaders are not going to get caught out by a split towards the end.
Well, if Team Bianchi coming up, I would suspect that is for Fabrizio Guidi. He's always ridden well in this race in the past. But now it looks like Euskaltel is giving it one last go here. They don't have any great sprinters, but they're going to try and do something.
Pull back there by Sergei Ivanov in second position in the white jersey of Fassa Bortolo. He's working for his team leader right now, Alessandro Patacchi. It's still all very much together. Everybody is grappling for position, trying to stay at the front end. They don't want to put their noses into the wind too early. And in fact, the Euskaltel-Euskadi rider is still holding an advantage of 3 or 4 bike lengths, but he's going to get swept up pretty soon.
Oh, just look how wet that road is now. This is Juan Fuentes of Seiko now, has got to the front over Sergei Ivanov. But they've got that train together and they've organised it better than I would have suspected. It looked to me as though Patacchi was backing out of this about 4 kilometres ago. But he's got the train up there now at 2 kilometres to the finish, 2,000 metres. Alessandro Patacchi is now putting himself in a position to win a stage of his 3rd Grand Tour of the year. Only 2 other riders in the world have ever done that, and not since 1958. He has a real chance, but bet your life Eric Zabel will know that, and I'm sure he's locked on his wheel.
He's absolutely locked on the wheel of Alessandro Patacchi, who's got 3 or 4 teammates around him right now. But I tell you what, look at that. There's a crash.
Yep.
Half a dozen riders gone off the road straight in that corner.
Well, that was to be expected on that sweeping bend. It looks like it is Verada or possibly not, but it's certainly a Lampre rider down remounted. There's more riders in the bales down below our camera. We can't go down to find out, so let's research the front of the bunch.
And they're not inside the last kilometre either, so those riders are going to lose time. And in fact, a yellow jersey went down there, so that would be one of the riders from Once as well. The confusion is not going to perturb the sprinters at the front end of the main field. And look at that, a complete change in colour right now. All white and blue jerseys. Fassa Bortolo are right up there. I think Jans Verada is still there as well, because there's a Lampre rider in about 10th place.
At 1 kilometre to go, that looks like Verada just going under the red banner there, about 12 men down the line, because that crash happened much further back where the sprinters would not have been. It'll be interesting to know if that was an Once rider that went down. It could have been a Vina Calderola rider. They're similar colours. Angel Edo is the rider just at the bottom of our picture. Zabel has got himself up there too. But it's all Fassa Bortolo trying to work this one out as they lead now. There's Zabel trying to jump on as Patacchi goes through second. Zabel is looking for that wheel. He's got third. It's going to be between Zabel and Alessandro Patacchi. Here's the lineup. Angel Edo is the rider in the green jersey trying to get in. He's waiting. He's got a little bit of respite as they come into the home straight now. As Fassa Bortolo and Domina Vacanzi might have Lombardi in on the picture here. Now that looks like the style of Lombardi. It is, who's gone through in second place as they come off that very tight bend. We need to get back to the front to see if Lombardi's got through. Patacchi looking around. Lombardi trying to break through on the left of the picture here. Julian Dean goes now. Dean on the inside to the left of our picture. Patacchi going for it as they come to the line. He's got it. Alessandro Patacchi takes it on the line, and it looks to me as though Julian Dean would not have been too far away from it. And talk about the race of the falling leaves. Look at them down the home straight. Tom Boonen did look as though he was in the picture, possibly second or third to the right of our picture. But Alessandro Patacchi took many risks and held his position well.
Unbelievable looking down here. A lot of these riders are very happy to cross the line here right now. We get a chance to see who did lose time in that crash. 1 or 2 riders taking serious risks to stay at the front end of the main field. But I tell you one thing, Alessandro Patacchi wanted that win. He wanted to write his name into the record books, but it was good to see Tom Boonen well up there in the sprint, as well as Eric Zabel and Julian Dean for the first time in many, many years, reminding us that he was, in fact, let's not forget, a very good bunch sprinter in the early part of his career.
And ouch, this is a rider from Euskaltel who's gone down here in the runnings. We see the sprint again. That's Dean on the left of our picture. But Patacchi is just a little bit too quick. I think we might see the rider fall there. On the right, possibly, there he is down at the end of the line. But at the front, Alessandro Patacchi gets win number 1. Zabel coming in there. Probably third, I would think. And I think that is Tom Boonen racing up towards the camera. He will have got the second slot. The cameras will tell. We can even see ourselves now. No doubt who the winner was. We've seen it 10 times already this year on the big tours. Now it's a big tour stage win number 11 for Alessandro Patacchi. Clear second place on this angle for Zabel. Tom Boonen nearest camera, they're saying made it. Are you sure? Yes, Boonen will get third for that. Zerada there in 7th place. Well, that was some sprint, and it was really for the fearless. But Alessandro Patacchi becomes rider number 3 to have win stages in all of the Grand Tours in the same season. We'll take a short break, then come back and join us for the presentations. And welcome back as the riders continue to ride in, as the conditions here get even darker on the finishing line of this stage of the Tour of Spain in Santander. The 154 kilometres have ended with a victory by Alessandro Petacchi, his 22nd win of the year and his 11th major stage victory on the 3 big tours this time around.
Well, quite remarkable, and that was a fairly difficult sprint to manoeuvre as well, because the roads completely changed in the last 20 minutes before the finish. It was dry just a few moments before the riders charged into town, and then this squall came in off the ocean and made that a very difficult run-in. 1 or 2 riders we can see further down involved in some pretty dramatic crashes on the run-in towards the finishing line, and we'll have to wait a few moments to find out just in fact whether or not any of the top contenders were involved in that crash with 1.5 kilometres to go. And you can see the wobble in the camera. That is because these winds that are coming in here are buffeting the camera positions at around about 55 kilometres an hour right now.
Yes, this is gale force. There's a proof of that with the sponsors' flags flying here. 5 minutes has passed by since the race finished, and the number of riders in those closing couple of kilometres have fallen. Now, as far as we know, we think we're pretty safe in saying so, the top riders on the general classification all finished in the same time, and it is going to be a situation where the race lead will stay with the same man. So Joaquim Rodriguez has got himself a second day in the golden jersey, and he's had to really ride hard over those last 2 kilometres. But these are the riders just creeping in here, and this looks like one of the De Vitamin riders coming in. Didn't quite catch his number there, Bob, but I think it was one of the De Vita quick-step riders.
One of the Patanina riders.
It's Patanina rider, is it? Well, either way, he's got his leg bandaged. I think he fell in the last kilometre, so he'll be fine. He won't lose any time at all. He'll just come home and he'll be okay. I think it's Pedro Diaz, the young Spanish rider, coming down the home straight.
Well, one rider we didn't see included in the top 10 on GC, just when they flash it on the screen, was Juan Miguel Mercado, the very gifted climber from the Banesto team. They've replaced his 10th place with Luis Perez, who won yesterday's stage, so I'm not sure that he wasn't caught in that big pileup with about 1.5 K to go. He might have lost a little bit of time, but we'll have to see back later. But you can tell how dangerous it is out there. Incredible winds, very slick, and here comes Petacchi, showing why he is the fastest man on the block so far this season.
He's certainly faster than Cipollini is currently, that's for sure now, and he's still developing. He's 29 years of age, Alessandro Petacchi. Won 49 races in his career. Tom Bonen off to the right of our picture, and Eric Zabel, the champion of Germany, he gets second place on the line. A good opening sprint by Julian Dean. I thought he'd done enough, but Petacchi is showing he's an absolute pure sprinter, and he doesn't mind what the weather conditions are like, because we've seen him win in just about every type of weather condition in what has been a wonderful season for him. Up until this year, Paul, Petacchi had never won a major stage in a stage race. He was finishing second and third. Look at the difference now.
Finishing second and third to a man by the name of Mario Cipollini, but I think he's learned a lot from Mario Cipollini, and just watch him as he comes to the line here. He does exactly what Cipollini used to do as well. He looks back to see how much he's won the stage by, and this really was a sweet victory for him. He predicted he was going to do it in the month of July, wanted to do this, and you see as soon as he starts his acceleration, it's like a drag racer, and he's got plenty of time to sit up and coast to the line there with Eric Zabel. I think now at 33 years of age, Phil, starting to slow off just a little bit in his sprinting. Let's not forget, though, in the Tour of Holland, Petacchi won 2 stages and Eric Zabel won 1.
Well, there's the result for you. Zabel again playing the bridesmaid to Petacchi in second place. Tom Bonen, he'd be very pleased with that third place sprint for him. Julian Dean looked to have had it and got phased out into fourth place. He's the New Zealand rider now riding for CSC. And Giovanni Lombardi, who threatens a stage win before the end in Madrid, might even be in Madrid, has come home here in 5th place. He was right up there, but I think that right-hand bend just before the finish really sent a few wobblers through those riders, and they were very nervous on the approach down to the finish. So that's the result of the stage. All of these men renowned for their sprinting. Boonen, of course, will, I think, be a much better sprinter as he progresses. Here we are, just about surviving the squall which is blown in, as we see now Alessandro Petacchi for the 11th time this year climbing on board for a major stage race victory, his 22nd of the season as well. He really is turning out to be quite a star. 6 stages in the Tour of Italy, 4 stages in the Tour de France, and there's still a long way to go yet in the Vuelta Espana.
Well, he really is a remarkable bike rider, and I think, Phil, that when we go across the next few stages, and Burgos is a very good stage for him to try and win, the next classification we'll be looking at is the King of the Mountains classification, and Luis Perez, with that very good ride today, getting himself points out on the course, has extended his lead in that classification ahead of the Colombian rider Felix Cardenas.
Yes, and they don't get a polka dot jersey, they get an orange jersey in the King of the Mountains, and so we might see him receive that on the podium, but I should imagine the rider's a little difficult to catch right now because of the weather conditions, but they've got him, and here he is, the orange jersey, as leader of the King of the Mountains. Difficult thing, isn't it, Bob, commentating every year on the big races and having to change our idea of what jerseys lead which?
Well, I don't think I've ever seen any other stage race in the history of cycling to have a polka dot jersey for anything except the King of the Mountain. It's such a well-established historical touchstone for cycling. I can't believe that the Tour of Spain organizers have given that to the leader of the points competition.
I know, well, I can assure you, Bob, it's only a matter of time before I call it the King of the Mountains. It's going to happen over the next few weeks. There's the home straight. I think all of the riders are in because that car stopped right on the line. As we're looking now, I can't quite read that. It looks about 10 minutes has now passed by since Pataki. We're waiting to see, just to get confirmation before we leave you as to the new leader of the Tour, or indeed the old leader of the Tour. We think it is still Rodriguez. We think he was again, because he's a reasonable sprinter, a best placed of the Once riders in that mass sprint. And he wasn't involved in any of the falls, which may later on reveal to see 1 or 2 riders have indeed lost time. But it just shows you, I find it very interesting, Paul, in a race that has no time bonuses. I rather like that because, A, it's easy to work out who the leader is after we get away from these early days.
Well, it's a very good thing that the Tour of Spain has done, Phil, over the last couple of years, because, you know, in fact, it is probably the only major tour that doesn't have a time bonus situation. It also makes it a lot easier. Difficult in the first few days because of the influence of the team time trial, but since then, it's going to make it, I think, a lot more interesting.
But, you know, we've only had 3 days. We're barely 300 kilometres into this race. We're looking at massive time losses for big names.
Well, it's huge. In fact, it was that first category climb of the race that actually, I think, caught 1 or 2 riders by surprise. And I think, Bob, it really is surprising to me to see Levi Leipheimer losing so much time quite quickly.
That's a disaster for Levi. His season was cut way short by the Tour de France getting crashed on stage 1. That would be the King of the Mountains jersey there, the golden one, it looked like, or maybe the general classification.
So this is the Pacific Life general classification. Rodriguez it is, and in fact, looking at the 5 names here, they are exactly the same as they were. Marcus Serrano completing the Once lineup in the team time trial, 4 of them still surviving, and here is the man about to get it. Oh, he's looking very casual today. Well, he had a dress rehearsal yesterday when he was really excited. Today, now it's all hat to get another golden jersey in the Vuelta Espana. And he's looking a little bit surprised, and I'm wondering if he's a bit shocked he's got this jersey.
Well, he may well be, and it won't be until later on maybe when they actually look at the overall classification and see where the riders came in on the individual stage, because at this point, with 4 riders from the same team in the same time in the overall, they may well have to do a count back to see whether or not he still is. He himself will know roughly where he crossed the line in relation to his teammates Gonzalez, Di Galliano and Nozal.
Well, we're live, of course. We have to accept what the organisation throws at us, but overnight we might well find there is a new leader in the Tour. Either way, I'm pretty sure it'll be an Once man, but they just may have to count back and see who has the highest point score of or the lowest point scores, they work it out in reverse. But there we are. At the moment is Rodriguez, who is still the leader. 2nd day in the golden jersey for him. 0 time for the first 4 riders on the overall classification. There's the problem out in the ocean there as the bad weather comes in. Rather hopeful that the weather will change a little bit tomorrow. There's confirmation of the Pacific Life general classification, with Rodriguez now just 7.5 hours in the saddle, 4 riders in the same time, all Once riders. Then come the boys from US Postal. Manuel Beltran is best of them. In 6th place should be Roberto Heras, and there he is, 10 seconds back. The Ozers are still there, Mancebo, Juan Mercado. Bob was thinking he might have lost a bit of time, but again, at the moment, they're saying that he is in 10th place. place, 24 seconds off the top of the leaderboard. The big news is, of course, Aito Gonzalez has lost almost 3 minutes so far, and other riders have also lost big time, including Angel Casero. Santander to Burgos tomorrow, very famous area for Spanish cycling, and an area which I'm sure we are going to see, I am hoping, a little bit better weather as we go due south away from Santander. We will be with you tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. live coverage, of course, 6:30 on the west coast Eastern time. This is 9:30. Santander to Burgos, 158 kilometres this year on the Tour of Spain. There are no kilometres up to 200. They're nice, short, snappy stages which lead to a very, very fast bike race. And of course, short stories from Paul, Bob and myself, Phil Liggett. If you come and visit us online at olntv.com, and it's there we will continue to update you on everything cycling and all adventure sports. So do come and see us on olntv.com. Tomorrow then is going to be another tough day if it hasn't been already, and overnight the results will confirm just who, if anybody, has lost more time out on the highway today. Certainly Roberto Heras is going to be absolutely delighted with the way his Vuelta Espana has started in these first 3 days. All right, well, that's it for today. Tomorrow then, we'll see you at 9:30 Eastern time. On behalf of Paul Sherwen and Bob Roll, I'm Phil Liggett saying so long, see you tomorrow.